You are now tuned into the Clout101 Marketing Podcast.
Do anything for clout.
Dissecting the marketing strategies behind the most influential people, brands, and moments in culture.
A whole lot of people need to hear this.
Today is your day.
Power your hustle with the Clout101 Marketing Podcast.
Hey guys, it's Chizzy Drew here.
This is your girl Chanel, and you are now tuned into
Clout101.
Clout101 Podcast.
And now your host, Idia, Ogala.
On today's episode, we have a very special guest joining us. Pauleanna Reid is a celebrity ghostwriter who helps high-profile leaders and doers turn their personal stories into powerful brand assets. She's founder and CEO at The Writer's Block, which is a full-service, multi-six-figure ghostwriting agency. She's also a senior contributor at Forbes and Business Insider, where she reports on female leaders and Black voices who are shaping the future. And in addition, she's also founder at New Girl on the Block. This is really dope. It's a mentorship program that serves over 200 millennial women in transition from over 10 countries around the world. On this episode, we discuss how she grew her ghostwriting agency to 6 figures while working a 9-to-5, how storytelling is a key tool for brand building, how to properly pitch media publications, i.e. Forbes and Business Insider, some of the foolproof ways to effectively earn mentorship and sponsorship with people that you look up to, and so much more. It's like literally a handbook for personal branding, and I recommend that everyone tap in, take notes, and share this with anyone who you think can benefit from any personal branding, personal marketing conversations, because Pauleanna, she is the truth. So I hope you guys enjoy. Thank you, Pauleanna, for joining. I really appreciate it. Very, very excited. As I told you before, looking forward to my listeners, anyone who stumbles across this, kind of hearing from you. I categorize you as a phenomenal woman, and just so proud of all the accomplishments that you've been achieving over the few years that I've known you. So thank you for joining.
I am happy to be here. I'm ecstatic. You have no idea.
Okay, so I like to jump into all of the interviews to kind of give some background and set the stage. Who is Pauleanna Reid? If you can describe yourself in a few words, that'd be great.
Yeah, I am a millennial woman who has fought for her dreams and won.
I like that.
I think it's really important to know who you are beyond your title.
Yes, for sure. And why is that important? Especially as society has kind of painted the picture that titles and things of that nature are, main drivers for kind of differentiating me versus you. Why do you like to kind of stress the importance of describing yourself and understanding who you are beyond what society labels you to be?
Because I feel like I work in the matrix. And if I don't know who I am beyond my title, I could go down a road to depression. I could go down a road of anxiety. I can get distracted from the things that are really important. And it helps me find my center when things get chaotic.
So in terms of your upbringing, I think it's also important to kind of shape that and to understand how that contributed to your journey to who you are today. I read that you came from a family of rules and limitations and Caribbean household. So I can imagine, as an African, grew up in an African household who kind of identifies the same as you in terms of limitations and rules and structure. I can imagine that did a lot for either your creativity or just forcing you to kind of think outside the box and try to find ways to grow into who you are within that structure. So can you just speak to your upbringing and what that did for you?
For sure. So I come from a 2-parent middle-class household. My mother is Trinidadian, my father is Jamaican, and I have 2 younger siblings, and we were raised to play it safe, right? I mean, I think oftentimes, in Caribbean households, you are raised to color within the lines simply because your family, they don't know what they don't know, right? And so I think the narrative that we are all accustomed to is that you get a job and you stay there for 100 years and you just build on your retirement fund. And so I was probably out of like my immediate and my extended family, I feel like I'm one of the first to really shake things up. Kind of step outside of the status quo. And I really had to find a place inside my heart where nothing was impossible, right? I feel like when you have teachers and guidance counselors and friends, people around you who are like, who don't quite see the vision that you do, because we're talking when I was young, like I envisioned myself standing on stages in front of thousands of people. I envisioned myself being a well sought after writer, right? So, but when people around you don't share the same vision, it can be very hard to push forward. I mean, I went through a lot of opposition because I didn't necessarily do well in school either, right? I wasn't a scholar, I wasn't top of my class. And so my teachers would look at my report card, they would ask me, you want to be a writer? But you just failed grade 11 and 12 English. How does that even work? My guidance counselor was like, nah, like that's not a profession that we think you'll thrive in. You shouldn't choose communications or journalism or English. Those were just not options available to me. But I think that if you want something badly enough, you'll teach yourself. And I was committed to doing the work no matter how long it took. So I've been a writer, a professional writer for about 10 years. And I just think that people don't stick to anything long enough to master it.
Mhm.
And so I stayed the course. And whether it took me 100 years, I would still be just as committed.
I also heard that you failed 11th grade English,
11th and 12th. Yeah.
11th and 12th. Have you
Yeah.
have you seen those teachers and those people who kind of said things to make you question your ability to execute?
I volunteer at my high school every year. And the two teachers that failed me in English class, I see them every single year.
And what
So
and what do they ask you to come back and speak to the kids?
I speak to the kids all the time. And it's just very interesting, and that's why it's so important for me to go back to my high school because it's very nostalgic. You know what I mean? Not only did I not do well on my report cards, but I was bullied a lot. And so I want people to know, I want students to know that like there's life beyond disappointment. I
Yeah.
want them to know that second chances exist. I want to help them see beyond the limits of their circumstances.
Mhm.
Because when I was in high school, I thought those 4 years would never end, right? Like I absolutely hated high school. But now
Yeah.
looking back, it was something that I needed because it really helped me build a backbone. And now when I go through criticism as an adult, it bounces off me. My bounce back game is so much stronger.
Yeah. I also kind of want to highlight the fact that you grew up in this structure, your parents were driving you towards, maybe more traditional career paths or just not enabling the creativity as much as they possibly could, right? And then on the other side, in terms of school, you had teachers who were judging you based on your performance, not based on what was in your mind, right? So
Right.
there's a lot of imagination that needs to be present in order for
Yes.
you to see yourself beyond where you currently are. And I think that imagination contributes to being a good storyteller. So can you talk about that a little bit? Because I think that's hand in hand in how amazing of a
Yeah.
writer you are today.
Absolutely. So, when we were kids, we are often told and taught that we can be anything and everything we want to be. And then we grow up and we enter high school and we're then told that we need to be more realistic.
Yeah.
And that is where a lot of students fall through the cracks because they're stuck in that gray area and they're now confused. And so I think the most successful adults in the world have not lost their childlike wonder, right?
Yeah.
I think they're still curious. I think they're still imaginative. I think, work is play, play is work. And I think that in order to maintain that sense of nostalgia, I feel like you have to fight for it because there's so many distractions, whether it's family, friends, whether it's media messages, whether it's, our work environment. So many people try to strip that away from you. And so, like I said, I had visions of who I wanted to become when I was younger. But as you navigate society, navigate the world, it's almost like it's frowned upon to dream big. They say dream big and then you enter your teens and your later years and then they're like, nah, like you have to be a little bit more realistic. What does your plan B and C look like?
Exactly. I feel as a marketer, I feel storytelling is important to be able to help people visualize what it is, whether it's you're trying to sell, you're just trying to engage, whatever the case may be, it's big in the branding, in the marketing realm. So can you maybe speak to how that basis of storytelling, that basis of creativity has helped you become a better brand marketer? And we'll dive deep into this like a little bit later. I just, surface level,
Yeah.
How writing, creativity, and storytelling kind of correlate to you being as good of a marketer as you are today.
Yeah. So I dropped out of college my second year. So that was 2008. And this was around the time Facebook and blogging And like, we really got our introduction to social media. And I think one thing to keep in mind is that the traditional school system teaches a very specific type of learner, one type of learner, when there are 7 types of learning styles. So I was a visual learner. I didn't learn this till my 20s, but I'm a visual learner. I think in pictures, I think in organized chaos. And so when social media and blogging came about, that was my time to shine. That was my time to really run with the fact that like these laneways were going to play to my strengths. And so I started a blog in about 2010, 2009, 2010. And that was my first introduction to the world. That was my first introduction to shaping my narrative. That was my first introduction to storytelling on a public level, public forum. And I'm one of those people who don't suffer from analysis paralysis. Even if something is a crappy draft, I'm still going to hit publish because I know it has room to evolve.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think it was the LinkedIn founder who said, Reid Hoffman, if your 1.0 is great, then you started too late. Right. And so I am really big on,
I like that.
I'm really big on just hitting publish. And so that's what I did. And that's the approach I take to everything that I do, because I think your audience will truly appreciate the evolution. I have people who have been following me for the last 10 years. So they've seen the growth, right? And so I think that they have an appreciation, and then they follow you because they want to see what's on the horizon.
That's amazing. The last episode, Matty J, he said something similar to that. He was like, it's not perfect. Well, you got this from a book. It's not perfect, but is it launchable? A lot of us, we kind of beat ourselves up over it, but the magic is actually in putting it out and allowing your tribe to give you that feedback that allows you to refine it faster, right? You actually develop faster when you put things out to the world and make yourself vulnerable. So I like that. Okay, so transitioning into your ghostwriting agency, I kind of want to talk about that. I think the first time we met and you told me about that and you gave me your elevator pitch, which we'll dive into that as well. But I never heard of a traditional ghostwriting agency. Like, it was just so, it was mind-boggling to me. Like, as a hip hop fan, you hear about it and you just think it's just, all right, someone writing someone else's raps, something along those lines. But the fact that you took something like that and then kind of made it your own, scaling very, very successful business, I think that's so intriguing. So first, can you just talk to me about how this idea emerged, where you got it from, and how you were able to kind of launch?
Sure. So speaking of the evolution of our dreams, I've been a professional writer for 10 years, and I've been several different types of writers. So I was a blogger, then I tried my hand at songwriting for a few years. I thought I was going to be a spoken word poet. Then I wrote a book and became an author. Then I became a journalist, right? So I think it's very important to allow your dream to evolve, because what you may think is the dream could actually be the pre-dream to the dream. It may be the thing that you need to learn and refine your skills before you get to your final destination, because there are jobs and then there are life assignments. Those are 2 very different things. And so my evolution through the writing industry, those were jobs. I have finally arrived at my life assignment as a ghostwriter. And so the other thing is, look for clues. Success always leaves clues. And I think success also has an equation. And so in my corporate career, which I've quit years ago, in my corporate career, I was an executive assistant to presidents and CEOs. So before I even knew what a ghostwriter was, I was already ghostwriting for my bosses. I was writing their emails. I was writing their speeches, right? And then in 2014, I ran into an article on Forbes.com about a ghostwriter. And so the other tip I want to leave is just be open. Like I said, success leaves clues. You have to be open to reading the room and seeing the signs. I stumbled across an article and I could have just let it go over my head, but I paused and I took it in, and it was about a ghostwriter who dropped out of high school. She's an older white woman, a ghostwriter who dropped out of high school and created a 6-figure company for herself. And I thought, okay. And I kind of put it in my memory bank, and I knew I was going to revisit it at some point. Fast forward to 2016, I create a great relationship with one of my mentors. She is the publicist to Ashley Graham, Serena Williams, Jill Scott, a bunch of really incredible people. And I end up freelancing for her agency remotely, because I'm based in Toronto, Canada. She's based in Philly. And that was my introduction to the celebrity world, right? So I went from corporate to now I'm entering the celebrity world. My first assignment for her was to write a speech for one of her clients for the Forbes Women's Summit. And now, rightfully so, and now I'm a writer at Forbes. But that was really my trajectory. I really just paid attention to the signs. I paid attention to my skill set. I connected the dots of my life and my career. And I arrived here through raising my hand, asking questions, staying curious. I got my first opportunity. I killed it. And then that was my aha moment when I was like, you know what? I can really do this, because I really think that in order to build a multi-million-dollar company, it really helps if you take the time to see and study how one is run. So while I was working at her agency, while I was navigating my corporate career, which is also a multi-million-dollar, probably multi-billion-dollar company, I was studying. I was studying everything. I was listening to how my bosses just navigated their strategy meetings. I was listening to how they would prepare for the next quarter, the next year ahead. And then I slowly started picking up the pieces and putting together my agency. I built it from my cubicle at my corporate job, and then I quit in January or February 2019.
So you said a lot there that I think it's amazing. One of the things that I heard is that you're an executive assistant, right? But didn't allow that title to essentially like consume you, right? It wasn't your identity. It was your role, and it's something that you were looking to master. And then from there, take those learnings and bring it to something else, right? So you were very intentional about what you wanted your end goal to be, which I think is really cool. And again, you recognize and position yourself based on like some of the transferable skills that you were able to get from the job. So I think that that's really dope. Like, what made you come into the situation with that mindset? How intentional were you about coming into that situation?
So my father is a side hustler, and my mother equally so is a hard worker. And so I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit in my household. And so for me, I know entrepreneurship, whether part-time or full-time, well, I don't really think it's part-time or full-time. It's really a lifestyle. But whether side hustle or, having my own business, I knew it was going to happen. It was just a matter of when. Another thing I'll say is I have incredible patience. I don't think that the universe or God or the world is obligated to give me shit, right? I'm going
Amen.
to put the work in that's necessary. And when the stars align, I will welcome it with open arms. So going into the corporate world, I've always been very analytical. I think one of my biggest concerns with our generation, as much as, we are praised for our innovative thinking and our fast forward approach, I do think that one of my concerns, because, and I am in a position to say this because I mentor a million people, is problem solving and critical thinking skills. Right? Yeah. I think that people need to strengthen those muscles. So going into any situation, I'm analyzing and reading the room. So I dropped out of school. I went into an administrative profession for 10 years. And I knew that working for CEOs and presidents was going to give me a competitive advantage. The reason why I use the term competitive advantage is because I have a very lengthy athletic career. I was a competitive swimmer for 11 years, right? Wow. And an Olympic hopeful. So as much as people say collaboration over competition, I think that there's room for both, right? And so I would go into my job as if I was going to business school every single day. I would raise my hand for opportunities. I would sit in strategy meetings and offer to take notes. I'd have coffee dates with all of the heads of the departments. I would join clubs and committees and associations, and I would volunteer, and I would do all the things so I could collect tools and resources and skill sets, because I knew where I was heading, and I knew that this was going to be very necessary in order to thrive once I decided to leave. I was a side hustler for 10 years. I was not in a rush. I absolutely loved my last job. But at a certain point, when you hit a crossroads, it's time to say goodbye and open a new chapter.
You also mentioned that people fall prey to self-limiting beliefs, right? That are kind of ingrained in you while working in corporate, right? And I like that you mentioned the idea of not complaining. No one owes you anything.
No.
So what advice do you have to people who are looking to brand themselves in the corporate landscape, right? They maybe have some of those self-limiting beliefs, or, maybe feel that because of what they see online, because of how fast the trajectory of their peers seems to be, kind of headed, that they feel that they deserve more, they, want more for themselves. What kind of advice do you give to your mentees based on your experiences in branding?
Number one, a lot of that shit is smoke and mirrors. even though you see someone ahead of you in the race,
Mhm.
I mean, you don't know their backstory. You don't know if they're doing anything illegally. I mean, I used to know a guy who had a Mercedes but didn't have no insurance. Like, you just don't know. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you literally don't know. So, like, I never make assumptions. I think the other thing is, you hit a great point. When you are in the corporate space, that is the best time to start branding yourself. And I would say the first step is starting with a LinkedIn profile. I think LinkedIn is a very underutilized platform. I, for one, love LinkedIn. It has the friendliest algorithms. I get a lot of business from LinkedIn. I think that's a good place to start. I think the third thing I'll say is that you have to decide what value system you have when you're navigating corporate. So here's an example. Every position I entered in the corporate arena, I entered at my salary cap.
Mm.
Money was never the most important thing for me. I wanted a millennial driven environment. I wanted a boss who could be a mentor. I wanted unlimited vacation. Like, I had so many other things on my checklist besides income, besides the dollar amount. Right. And I think that put me in a great position because I was able to navigate a lot easier. Oftentimes when you work in a corporate job, they don't want you doing anything outside of work. So that was also really important to me. Anytime I entered an interview process, this is a two-way interview, right? I'm
Yeah.
also seeing if you're a good fit for me. And so I
Mhm.
always made it very, very clear that I have a life outside of this job. I have other shit I got to do. I got dreams I have to pursue. And if you ever make me choose, it's not going to be you. So that off the bat, off the rip, I set the tone. And any job who was not in alignment with that, who didn't give me the flexibility and freedom to spread my wings, and I would always position it as a benefit to the company. I would
Yeah.
always tell them, you want someone who's multifaceted. You want
Mhm.
someone who has a layered approach, to approaching projects. You want someone who is not a one-trick pony. And so when I would position it that way, they'd be a lot more open-minded, and, we made it work.
I like that because it's a two-way street. The resources that you're gaining and some of the experiences you're gaining on the side hustle front can be applied to what you guys are, kind of building with the company. Some of your resources, your contacts, some of those things. So if you position yourself appropriately, and as you mentioned before, coming into the interviews, kind of expressing that and using that as almost like a litmus test to see how comfortable they'll be with you continuing to do what you've been doing. I think that kind of unlocks like a different type of value and a different type of freedom when it comes to that work situation. So I like that. I kind of want to talk about, so staying on the ghostwriting agency, you have a lot of high net worth and celebrity clients, right? Having worked at the NBA and working with players and stuff like that, I understand what that relationship dynamic, could be. Obviously, a lot of them are approached on a transactional front from time to time. And, maybe they kind of fear working with folks because of, not clearly understanding their intentions and things of that nature. So how did you, from a marketing point of view, position yourself with your personal brand, with your company's brand, to develop that trust, develop that buy-in, and kind of land those big contracts with those celebrities and influencers?
My biggest frustration is that people want things too soon. They want things prematurely. So they want to build a multi-million-dollar brand. They want to get celebrity clients. It's like, but what is your track record,
Mhm.
right? Like, what does your portfolio look like? How strong are your creative muscles, your skill set? So for me, I spent an insane amount of time building my credibility. And so this is chess. This is not checkers. This is not Connect Four, right? Spend the time to build your credibility so nobody can question you. I can't tell you the last time I've ever had to send a resume. I
Mhm.
can't tell you the last time I've had to show my portfolio because I have built so much market value. So Amanda Seals, which I love, she talks about your self-worth versus your market value. Now, your self-worth is how you view yourself. It's what your close peers, how they perceive you. Your market value, I mean, that's the rest of the world, right? So do you have the respect of your industry peers? Are you considered a thought leader or an authority in your space? What does the market have to say about you? And I think that's the biggest thing. That's the missing puzzle piece that people don't think about. Like, you have no market value. No one knows what the hell you do. No one knows how well you do it. No one knows how long you've been doing it. And so this is where the storytelling piece comes in. It's really important that you are, and I find this happens a lot with women. we shy away. Oftentimes we shy away, and this is called the confidence gap. We shy away from our accomplishments. I, for one, am really good at bragging on myself, right? And I don't give a fuck. Like, I will share my experiences. I will share my accomplishments because I want to show other women that it's possible. I created an entirely new lane for myself. This is a lane where, like you said, ghostwriting is really well known in music. I have created a lane in business. So not only does my team ghostwrite books, but we do public speeches. We do public statements. We do op-ed. So if we have an executive who's been asked to write an op-ed in the New York Times or the LA Times, we are hired to execute and to advise this individual on their approach. So for me, like, you have to read the room, can't be afraid to penetrate a market. And they also say, if you're not the first to market, be the best to market. You can only be the best to market if you refine and practice your skill set. Again, I was a blogger, songwriter, poet, author, journalist, right? And I was also even strategic where I became a journalist. I started in the... I'm very passionate. So the people in the house are like, yo, shut up. I started writing for newspapers, right? And then I decided to write for Forbes and Business Insider, right? So it's very important. Like, you have to think about playing in traffic. That's what one of my mentors always tells me. Play in traffic, right? So by playing in traffic, AKA writing for two of the most well-known publications in the world, business publications, it allowed people to now see me in a specific light. And that's how I was able to attract some of my first clients. But also just being a natural born hustler. Like, in my 20s, I had unlimited vacation in my corporate job. So I took business trips for all of my vacation time. And I would just go to New York and I would set up meetings with strangers, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Every time I come to New York, I'm very meticulous about schedule, like literally from sunrise to sunset. I'm scheduling meetings for like 3 days and then I'm flying back home. There are some instances where I'm flying. And again, I'm in Toronto, so New York is about an hour flight. I'll fly to New York. There's nothing like having a collision of ideas in person.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. TD Jakes, this is the last point I'll make before we move on. TD Jakes also says, you will not go further than you think. And so there are too many people who are confined, not only in their minds, but geographically, right? So like, they haven't left their neighborhood, their community. Yeah. And there are sometimes, like, I can't run my business in Toronto. There are no celebrities in Toronto. A lot of them end up moving to the States. So I have to be in the room. I have to be in the space. I have to play in traffic. And sometimes that means jumping on a plane, train, or automobile.
I have to ask this follow-up before we pivot, because you did bring up Forbes, and that's a natural transition. But how has playing in traffic been impacted? I would assume positively, but I'll allow you to answer based on the pandemic and maybe limited traveling and everyone kind of being a captive audience virtually. Has it made your life easier? Has it made it more challenging?
2020, due to the pandemic and civil unrest, my phone was ringing off the hook, right? Yeah. You had CEOs, particularly white CEOs, and members and executives of Black Hollywood. They were calling me because they wanted counsel, right, on how to make a statement on behalf of the company, how to make a statement and address their employees, media training if they had to make appearances on a television network. Some people were on an apology tour, right? So I actually had to hire more people during the pandemic. And I'm very grateful for that because, so many of my friends, the company that they built their entire lives just tanked. So the credibility that I've built collectively over numerous years, in addition to my position at Forbes, helped tremendously because, when people call me, we get straight to the point. I don't have to prove. I don't have to, there's no back and forth. We get straight to the point. And it's been really, unfortunately, my business thrives when the world is chaotic.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So transitioning a little bit to working at Forbes. You mentioned it a little bit earlier. I just kind of wanted to spend a tiny bit of time on that. From your story, from what I understand about how you got that gig, and you kind of like, jumped over it a little bit when you were explaining, but it was a product of perseverance, of hustle, right? And of, in my opinion, creating good fortune for yourself, right? Rising to the occasion. So can you just touch on that story briefly?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important.
So the first lesson is to raise your hand. No one can read your mind. If you want something, you ask for it. I developed a great relationship with another one of my mentors who was in the media space. And after I have interned, worked for, or produced special projects for every one of my mentors, let's just say that. I build trust with them so that when I do get ready to ask for something, it's mine. So I built trust over the course of a few years with this particular mentor. And then one day I called her and I asked her, hey, I see that you work closely with Forbes Women. I would love to know how I can become a writer. She said, no problem. I flew to New York. We had a meeting. I would say it took me about almost 2 years to onboard, maybe a year and a half to onboard, because I flew to New York, had a meeting with a group of editors. Those editors had a career change, and then I had to rebuild my relationship with the team. It actually worked out really well because the second time I flew to meet with the team, we had a meeting and we were openly discussing, at the time, the hot topic was Bill Cosby. In my head, I was like, okay, I'm at a round table with these smart, incredible women. And I was, you have that imposter syndrome. Can I contribute to this conversation? How far should I go? So I just said, listen, this is your one and only chance. Speak up. So I spoke up. I contributed to the conversation. And that was probably the sole reason why I actually got brought on board. Because A, closed mouths don't get fed, right? Mm-hmm. B, as a journalist, people want to know that you're not just going to be mute, that you have something to say, you have something to stand on, you will have something to fight for. And the third thing is, Alex Wolf, she says something that I will always take with me. She says, you cannot be interesting if you're not interested. Mm. And what that means is you cannot be cool, smart, and interesting. You cannot attract great people, opportunities into your life if you're not interested. So by being interested, so that means by assessing your own media diet, right? By staying in tune and tapped in with what's going on in the world, the community, your industry. Like, I was equipped to handle this conversation because I was tapped in. But if you don't take the time when you're going through your morning routine, when you're en route to work, if you don't take the time to really take note of the historical events, pop culture moments, et cetera, going on around you, then when you are up to the plate, when it's your time to speak up, you're going to feel that sense of insecurity because you don't know what to say. You don't know how to contribute. But I had a moment of that. And then I thought to myself, wait, I know everything about this case. I have similar experience. I'm going to say something. And I said something and it started a great conversation. And she was like, yo, you're in. It was an easy decision because I opened my mouth.
See, that's the difference between a seat at the table and a voice at the table, right? So we all want to be in the room. We all want a seat, but sometimes we limit ourselves and we limit the access and the impact that we can have by keeping our mouth shut. So I like that. And that obviously proved to, help you get the position that you wanted, and prove your value in ways that, interview or sending sample of a story, things like that probably wouldn't have the same impact than them hearing from you in person and seeing how intelligent you are when it comes to expression. So I think that's dope. On the topic of your mentor or your sponsor, the one who had the relationship with Forbes, can you just talk about sponsorship in general, right? What steps can a person listening to this kind of take to better understand their leverage and then figure out how to create value that helps them earn sponsorship?
Yeah. So like I said before, I've volunteered, I've interned, and I've produced special projects for all of my mentors. And so over time, you just develop a trust where they will vouch for you. So if I call any one of my mentors, they are going to pick up, right? So I've said this many times in my own content. One question I've consistently asked myself is, am I the type of woman a world-class performer would actually want to mentor? Do I bring value to the table that they would actually want to fuck with? And the two rules I follow is I try to always reduce stress and add value, right? If you can master those two things, you will always be invited to the room. You will always be invited to the table. You will always be invited to speak. So I think it's something that no one's obligated to give you shit. It's something that has to be earned because someone's putting their name on the line for you. Someone is making introductions on your behalf. Someone is picking up the phone and getting you that job. And so, I can't tell you how many times my mentors have provided me an opportunity And the one thing that most of them say is, don't fuck this up.
Yeah.
And I take that very, very seriously. I take that very, very seriously.
I like that. So transitioning a little bit, I'm curious. I'm going to ask this question to a lot of people who either are around high value individuals and people who have a lot of stories about perseverance and determination. What's a commonality between all of the people you've
Got it.
interviewed for Forbes and like something that you've maybe taken and added to your toolbox over the years?
Sure. So I would say the best interviews are when people are vulnerable, when they are in their flow,
Mhm.
when they're not anxious or uptight. Of course, there's going to be a little bit of nervousness,
Mhm.
but when you can back up your advice with a story. So storytelling is a consistent thread and a skill that you will use in every aspect of your life. It's very important that you know how to articulate your story, your founder story, your why, your personal mission statement. Like, you don't even have to run a company, but you should have a personal mission statement, right? What are you standing on? What are your morals, your values, your belief system? What are you fighting for? I mean, those things should just come naturally to you. And then the other thing, a consistency that I've seen in my interviews is just, you know, people oftentimes think Forbes is the creme de la creme, right? And so I want people to understand, you know, like, don't get it twisted. Like, Forbes comes with a very heavy name, but with or without Forbes, you're still amazing,
Mhm.
right? Like, that's not the end all be all. That should not be like, oh, I've made it. Forbes is just as great as any other platform. It's a chance to share your gifts with the world. It's a chance to solve problems for the reader. So I just want people to have a sound mind. I want people to level set. I want people to release themselves of this idea that if I'm not in Forbes, then that means I ain't shit. That means I haven't made it. That means I'll never be X or I'll never be Y. You know, we're all human beings. We're all trying to figure this shit out. And you will get there when you are meant to get there.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. And I feel like the people who kind of spend their time building a business and focusing their efforts on like, how can I be great? How can I separate myself from the pack? By the time they get the Forbes interview, now they have a whole catalog worth of content and catalog worth of achievements and things of that nature that Forbes audience hopefully will then be able to go back to and reference. It actually makes you, more compelling to work with or to partner with or whatever the case may be. On that note, though, I want to talk about pitching. You are, I've watched a couple of videos. You've mentioned this before. I've also had conversations with you about the idea of pitching for media coverage and things like that. Obviously, media coverage is a great marketing tool, right? Showcase, your successes and how your company or your personal brand solves the problems for wider audiences. But the problem is that a lot of people do it incorrectly, or they, mess up their opportunities, to be able to, make a good impression on publications, on editors, things of that nature. So what's the most effective way to pitch stories and get features?
I mean, we don't have enough time. So I would say the most common mistakes is that people are just ill prepared, right? So they don't have their creative collateral. So bio, media kit, high quality videos or photography. The other thing is they pitch from an ego driven place, not a purpose centered place. So they pitch because they expect a profile. They pitch with the idea that, oh, I'm going to be able to put the Forbes logo on my website banner, and not with the intention of helping the audience solve a problem.
Yeah.
And that is what's most important. And then the last thing I'll say is not being prepared for the opportunity in terms of, so you want to pitch to Forbes, you get the green light, but then the interview. So like, I can't tell you, there have been many times in my years of being a journalist where I've given the green light for a story and the person does not have great interview skills. Like, it's a boring interview. It flatlines. They can't articulate, when I ask about business operations or when I ask about profit projections or when I ask about team build, like, they can't articulate answers that would give me the meat that I need, the substance that I need to make a great article. So I would say media training is also really important. Like, you want to be in Forbes, you want a journalist to write an article about you, but you don't know how to interview, right? Like you run the risk of that whole entire interview being scrapped.
Yeah.
So you just want to make sure you're prepared. The last thing I'll say is just make your pitch concise, short and sweet, get to the point as fast as possible. You know, who do you help? Why do you help them? And how does it fit into a larger, timely conversation that's happening right now?
A little bit more on the personal branding side, a couple questions there before we jump into, best practices and rapid fire and close out. You do a lot, right? In addition to the contributing, as you mentioned before, you mentor, you're a guest speaker, do a lot of keynotes and stuff like that. You lead workshops, right? So from a branding, marketing point of view, what has been the biggest driver of growth in your brand among these different mediums that you're kind of building out? And this question is dedicated to like folks who are in your position, right? Who have identified their niche, who are doing their thing, who want to grow their influence and are just trying to figure out the route to kind of explore. So
Yeah.
what would you say?
I've mastered one thing at a time, right? I didn't come out the gate doing 5 different things and juggling 5 different balls. So I would say, I mean, collectively, they all are fantastic drivers. I would say what gets the most attention is definitely through social, but also too, I think some areas that are missed opportunities is like thought leadership pieces. So whether you have a contributing role at a publication or you have a personal blog or a YouTube channel, people need to know that you know what the hell you're talking about. They need to see you in leadership positions. I also sit on 2 boards this year, right? Like if people don't see you as a leader, then don't expect to be featured in a publication as an authority. So when we think of tennis, we think of Serena, we think of ball, we think of Kobe. When people think of your market, are you one of the top 5 people that come to their mind? And so my content consistently reinforces people that I am the go-to when it comes to turning your personal stories into brand assets. And if you need support in that, then my agency is where you need to be. So yeah, and I think just like subtle things, like I had a viral tweet recently about finding love on Clubhouse. I'm sure you know.
Yeah, I saw that.
And
Yeah.
it also was a viral Instagram post as well, and it made it its way onto Shade Room.
The shade. Yeah.
But one thing did you notice is that beside my handle, beside my name, in bold letters on my Twitter handles, like it said Ghostwriter.
Mm.
So mind you, it went viral and a lot of people had things to say about it. But for me, if you think about the rule to networking, it's not about who you know, it's about who knows you.
Mhm.
So like there's subtle things that you can do to market yourself that are not so obvious. Because I used to just have my Twitter handle and then I'm like, okay, there's more room to play with. So then I added my title. So now 20,000 people have seen that. I also use my email signature. That's also a missed opportunity a lot of people don't take advantage of. When I navigate LinkedIn, every person who adds me, because I play in traffic, I respond with a hello, how are you? Thanks for inviting me into your network. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me if you need anything. And I attach my capabilities deck, another missed opportunity. I think that people assume that just because they have a fancy website, that people are just going to take the time, busy people are going to take the time to click every page and navigate and read all your text. They're not, right? So I have a capabilities deck, which is a snapshot of who I am, what I do, what is my gift, how I deliver that, the quality of my service, etc. And that has been probably the biggest, beyond everything else, the biggest driver of business is my capabilities deck. And so people can get a clear snapshot of my services and make a quick decision.
Yeah, I like a lot of this. I think it's just the importance of being more proactive, right? A lot of us are not proactive. We try to do things with intention and hope that, people will fall into the trap of finding us and finding our brand and learning more about us. But every story that you've kind of given and every piece of advice you've given has been more proactive, right? More traditional in the form of finding people and articulating your value and just letting them know that you exist. So that way, if in 3 years, in 2 years, in 6 months, when they need a ghostwriter or they need someone who can perform to your level of capability, you're already top of mind. So I like that
I think
approach.
it's also just being a conversation starter, right? I don't want anyone to take this the wrong way, but I do mentor Mondays and I'm in the community and I mentor a lot. So I've engaged with several different types of personalities. Sometimes it's not the product or service. Sometimes people don't hire you because you're just boring. You're not a vibe, right? The chemistry is not, no, like I can't tell you how many times I have been on phones with executives at some of the top companies in the world. They don't even know what they want to hire me for. They just want to be around me. You know what I mean? Because of
Yes.
the energy, because of the flow, because they're like, you remind me of my younger self. Like, how can we work together? Right. So like, I want people to keep that in mind as well. I tell stories and I deliver video content and I have a way about me that is my signature. You know what I mean? So people remember that stays with them. They know every time they land on my page, one of my social channels, they know the energy they're going to get. They know I'm a sharpshooter. They know that I get straight to the point. There's no fluff. You know, I'm not telling you about when I was 5 years old, blah, blah, blah. Like, you know, and so sometimes I interact with people, mentees and strangers, and the energy's low. And it's like, you know, they have these desires in their heart to like build a strong company and but like, you need to work on your personality. You're boring. So that's why people don't want to fuck with you.
And how do they do that? How do they get these reps, especially this younger generation that's more virtual than in person and having those meaningful, interactions?
I mean, you got to take that shit to your therapist, right? I think the other thing is like, I mean, it requires self-awareness. Some people are not even aware,
Yeah.
right? So there's a level of self-awareness and emotional intelligence required. And maybe it either means you got to work on some things, or I have a resource. Check out Susan Cain. Sometimes people are more introverted, so I don't want to dismiss that, right? I'm an ambivert. I can give out a lot of energy, but then I gotta, like, after this interview, I'm crawling in bed to decompress. So like Susan Cain is amazing. She wrote a book called Quiet, and the subtitle is something along the lines of The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking, something like that. And it's an excellent resource. And she details the stories of various successful people who are introverts that you wouldn't even think were introverts. And so, yeah, I mean, it's something that needs to be refined. And the thing is, being a personality doesn't have to be loud.
Yeah.
It does not have to be loud. That's the other thing I want to say too. You just have to find your way to get noticed. Why would people want to flock to you? Like, I was obsessed with Grey's Anatomy and This Is Us, right? But there's a reason. So like, you have to think of yourself, your channels, like when people are flipping through, why are they going to stop and tune into you?
I like that. On that note, there's also obviously an elevator pitch. So when you discover that part about you, right? How you stand out, how you separate yourself, what your personality type is, and how you want your brand to be perceived.
Yeah.
You know, there's a process of articulating your elevator pitch, right? And you reference that as connecting the dots of your life. So how important are elevator pitches for your personal brand? What is yours, and what is some advice on, structure to help people build that out on their side?
It's just a matter of like, when people bump into strangers, they freeze up. You know what I mean? They freeze up and they and they and, I'm kind of working on this thing, or I'm working on this small project, or they like downplay. I remember I was in an interview many, many years ago, and part of the interview, the gentleman said, take a second to brag on yourself. And I was like, are you sure? And then, because like it kind of threw me off guard. But like, yeah, like honestly, I think we need to remove words like aspiring. Like if you're a writer, you're a writer. Like remove words that negate from how brilliant you are, So my elevator pitch is, my name is Pauleanna Reid. I am a journalist and celebrity ghostwriter. I help the leaders and doers who are shaping the future turn their personal stories into powerful brand assets. Kind of like Judy Smith meets Cardi B.
I like that. And then what's your advice on structuring it?
I was just going to say, like, you need to practice at home before you go into the world, right? So like, don't just wait until the opportunity arises and then you're umming and ahhing and you're not confident, right? So like, just practice. I have several different elevator pitches depending on who's in the room, who I'm talking to, what the opportunity at hand is. You're allowed to have more than one. You can, tweak it as necessary. But the most important thing, don't sound like a robot, just like it should just roll off the tongue.
And I also like that you stress that you don't need to be in business to have an elevator pitch. Like everyone, people listening
Even
right
students.
now may feel like I don't have a business. I'm not an entrepreneur, or whatever the case may be. It's like, no, you don't. It's more about just articulating who you are, expressing who you are, so people know what kind of value that you bring and how you choose to define yourself, right? Not letting someone else put you in a box. So I like that. Okay, so moving forward to a couple of, quick questions. I know that you're running low on time.
Right.
The first one is, with mediums changing every day, like you touched on Clubhouse briefly, and a shift towards more monetization, more, seamless community building. What excites you in the content slash storytelling landscape over the next year or so? So like there are platforms like we mentioned Clubhouse, there's, platforms like Gumroad and, Patreon and Substack and, Twitter's experimenting with subscription-based stuff for people who
Right.
have audiences that care about what they're talking about. So as a storyteller, as a content guru, what are you paying attention to try and pivot your personal brand to align with?
I'm so old school. Like, I'm often late on these things. I'm never in a rush to just jump on something. I like to read up on it. I like to gauge other people's experiences. All of it excites me, but I don't think all of it's for me. And I think as individuals who are listening to this episode, you just need to know what is for you. Don't just jump on every new shiny object, right? So yeah, so I think for me, I mean, right now I'm navigating Clubhouse. It has worked for me. I have incredible relationships as a result. I've made a lot of business deals as a result. So that's where I'm going to stay for now, and I'm kind of just experimenting and just kind of like taking my time with the others. So, just you don't need to be on every platform. Decide what's for you and leave the rest.
Got it. So talking about tools, right? Tools that you use for, obviously your ghostwriting service, your mentorship situation, managing tight deadlines with Forbes and Business Insider. I'm sure that there are some digital resources, whether it's software, whether it's apps, that allow you to, maintain high value, execute at a high level. So can you share some of those things that help you?
I mean, well, I used to be an executive assistant. So the obvious is my Google Calendar. Like nothing happens without an invite, right? So I'm very meticulous with how I organize my time. And I think that's the biggest thing, right? We all have 24 hours and lack of time is not the issue. The truth is most people mismanage it. So like, I don't care how many tools you have in your toolbox. If you cannot manage your time, it doesn't matter. So I color code, I time block. I have an assistant. I have an assistant for my assistant, right? Like I just make sure that the basics and the foundation is there. And then moving forward, my team, we use monday.com for project management. I love a good Excel sheet. Like I kill a good spreadsheet. I'm just very organized. I'm a visual learner. I need to see things. So I have 2 giant whiteboards. I have a cork board in my office. So I write everything down. So I have a million notebooks and sticky notes. So that's like, honestly, that's like really what's most important to me.
Got it. Okay. And then in terms of remaining a student of your game, right? Are there any specific things that you're doing to kind of educate yourself, stay sharp, and innovative day in and day out?
I think that it's important to have a life. And I encourage all of my friends who are entrepreneurs to make sure you have hobbies, right? So like we can talk about all the books that we read and all the podcasts we listen to, but nothing gives me more pleasure, more joy, more inspiration than having a life outside of work. So going to the gym to build my mental toughness, playing with my niece and my nephews, just like having girl talks and participating in mastermind groups and just chopping it up with friends. Like I need to give my brain that rest. Like I'm no longer a part of hustle culture, even though I work incredibly hard. I have a life now and I'm enjoying it. And that's what really like helps me like stay ahead of the curve.
I like that because, it gets sensationalized sometimes, that hustle culture. But if you're managing your time, as you mentioned, and if you're being intentional, you don't have to stay up 20 hours out the day to try and get things accomplished. So I like that.
Exactly.
And then final question on this topic, what's one skill that you recommend each listener learn to become a better marketer in 2021 and beyond?
The 2 skills I mentioned earlier, problem solving and critical thinking. And you need to exercise those muscles by playing in traffic and volunteering yourself for opportunities, right? So whenever I want to approach a high profile individual, CEO, new company, like I take an assessment of their brand. I try to find something that I can contribute to make their lives easier. So like there are so many people who want to build businesses, but the best and most successful businesses and companies are able to address a problem. So if you are a problem solver, you will always get paid. If you are a resource, you will always get paid. If you are a critical thinker and people can come to you to decode their ideas, you will always be paid.
That's fire. Okay. And then a couple more. So this is like the rapid fire area. You mentioned some of these already throughout the course of the interview, so I won't ask it again, but let me just jump in. So first one is, if you can choose anyone to be your mentor, who would it be?
Sheryl Sandberg.
Sheryl Sandberg. That's
And I know a lot of people at Facebook. I know a lot of people just do not rock with her, but no, and for many reasons, rightfully so. But I'm reading one of her books right now, Option B, and it's about grief and loss and how to be a more compassionate person and leader. And she's just the vibe right now. So I feel like 2020, outside of the obvious, right, the civil unrest and the pandemic, I lost a few friendships, whether that was due to health reasons, not necessarily COVID related, or it was due to us growing apart, right? Because I think we all discovered so much about ourselves. So you have to shed some people in your life. And this book is really it's just providing a lot of insight and helping me. So honestly, I would love to have a conversation with her.
Hopefully we can help you set that up. Hit up some people on my side. Who's on your board of directors and what's their relation to you?
They're all, different ages, different salary brackets, different industries. And I think it's really healthy to have mentors who don't look like you. So there's a mix. There's powerful Black men and women, and then I have powerful white men and women.
Any people who don't have the official mentor title that you kind of put in that light in terms of a board and influential folks who help you do your decisions?
I mean, a lot of people have influenced some of the decisions I've made, but my mentors and advisors, they're people that I talk to consistently. So, they're the only people I'm going to give that title to because they've invested in me intentionally. Yeah.
And then in one book, podcast, or content series that has helped you along your way that people can kind of tap into after listening to this interview.
Sure. So a hidden gem that is not so obvious. So I used to work for one of the most respected consulting agencies in the world, BCG, the Boston Consulting Group. So 4 of their partners wrote a book called Rocket. And I remember, I was interviewing for the position and I was sitting in the lobby and I saw this book on the coffee table and I asked about it and then I got my hands on a copy. It is by far one of the greatest books I've read, only because as a very large consulting group, I mean, they've had clients like Starbucks and Victoria's Secret. And I really love how they break down the pain points of these companies and what they did to solve and address these pain points. So it's honestly a book filled with case studies. And I like things like that. So it's been really insightful to me because, again, I'm such a visual learner. I need to be able to put the puzzle pieces together. So it breaks it down really well.
Got it. And that's Rocket 8 Lessons to Secure Infinite?
Yeah.
Cool. I'm gonna check it out. I'm gonna add it to my cart right now on Amazon.
Cool. I don't like the obvious authors and books. It's not that I don't like them, but when I'm recommending a book, I try to think of what's something that they haven't heard of,
Yeah. No, I like that. Yeah, I haven't heard of that at all. So I'll definitely check that out. And I recommend everyone else who's listening to this check it out as well. All right. Thank you. That's the last question on my side. Is there anything you want to plug? Anything you want to drive people to?
You can find me anywhere. My name is very uniquely spelled, Pauleanna Reid. Get to know it. Google it.
She's the only Pauleanna in in North America. So
yeah. So this was a great interview. Thank you so much.
No problem. No, thank you. I appreciate you. Thank you very much for tuning into today's episode. We hope you found immense value in the discussion, but more importantly, we hope you were left with some practical gems that you can use to power your hustle immediately. For episode notes, for resource lists and cheat sheets, please visit Clout101.com. And to stay up to date on all things Clout101, please follow us on Instagram at Clout101MKTG. Lastly, it would mean the world to us if you left a rating on whichever platform you listen with, whether it's Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio. It helps us better understand how to serve you and also what to improve on episode to episode. I'm Idia Ogala signing out. Stay safe, blessed, and encouraged.